A pigeon walks onto a city bus. The doors fold shut, and 6 adults look at one another before anyone looks back at the bird. That half-second glance is what this video is about. Psychologists call it social referencing, and your brain has been running this program since infancy, because checking a stranger's face during something strange has almost nothing to do with wanting their approval. Nobody on that bus knows the pigeon's name, nobody asked for its opinion, and yet the stranger across the aisle has suddenly turned into the most useful object in the vehicle. Your brain wants to know whether they saw it, whether they seem alarmed, and whether this counts as a bird problem, a bus problem, or an ordinary Tuesday. That glance is not random awkwardness. It is your brain running 2 jobs at the same time. One asking whether you actually saw what you think you saw, and the other asking what everyone is supposed to do about it. You are not looking at the stranger because their opinion carries weight. For 1 second, their face works as a second set of eyes in a social thermometer. The sequence moves fast. Something strange happens. Your eyes lock onto it, they jump to a nearby face, and then they return to the strange thing, not because the object is probably transformed while you were looking away, but because you are checking whether another mind has registered it. That face is not handing you a detailed report, and it may offer nothing more than a raised eyebrow, a frozen mouth, a laugh, or the expression every commuter has perfected, which is complete emotional neutrality while mentally screaming. That tiny reaction still answers several things at once. Whether the event happened, whether it counts as dangerous or funny or rude or impossible or the result of poor sleep, whether you should act, and whether the correct move is to appear deeply fascinated by the emergency exit. Humans are unusually good at treating other people's attention as information. Neuroscientist Stephen Shepard describes gaze following as a rapid and widespread social behavior in humans and other animals, and we tend to look where other people look because another person's attention may point toward food, danger, opportunity, or something worth understanding. Your eyes are not only tracking objects, they are tracking perspectives. Part of what makes this happen so fast is that dedicated brain circuitry is processing those faces before your conscious mind catches up. The fusiform face area handles the rapid recognition of faces as faces, while the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is already cross-checking the stranger's expression for signs of danger before you have finished forming a thought about the pigeon. Somebody stares at the ceiling, and the ceiling becomes interesting. Somebody turns toward the trees, and your neck may follow before your conscious mind has finished asking why. There could be a bear out there, or there could be a very committed squirrel. Your visual system does not open a full investigation. It starts with a cheap question about what has captured that person's attention. Gaze carries more than direction, and a 2024 study from researchers at McGill University and the Université du Québec à Montréal makes that clear. Across 2 experiments, participants responded to visual targets while looking at an avatar whose gaze could point one way, while the avatar's apparent perspective pointed another. And when those 2 signals came apart, performance got worse. A face does not merely report where somebody is looking, it hands you a rough model of what they might be seeing. That mechanism earns its keep when the event itself is unclear. Ordinary objects need almost no interpretation, since a chair is a chair and a banana is usually a banana, unless it has entered a bus with criminal intent. Weird events work differently because they arrive with missing information. A loud crash lands in another room. A person in the supermarket walks backward through the automatic doors. Someone drops a tray and the sound is so dramatic that it seems to have involved either a metal staircase or a small explosion. Your own senses hand you fragments, while another person's reaction hands you context. All of this sits close to joint attention, which is 2 people attending to the same thing and recognizing in some form that they are both doing it. No speech is required, no pointing is required, and sometimes the entire exchange amounts to you looking at the broken glass, the stranger looking at the broken glass, the stranger looking at each other. Now the event has 2 witnesses. That matters because a strange event feels different once somebody else has visibly registered it. Alone, you might wonder whether you misheard the noise, but after watching another person react, the event moves from something possibly inside your head to something that exists between you. A stranger becomes a temporary external sensor. Shared looking does more than coordinate where people point their eyes, and research on joint attention suggests it can change how information gets processed. In 2 adult studies using eye-tracked avatars, participants remembered more pictures when they initiated shared attention than when they simply followed another person's gaze. Recognition in that first study came in at about 67% when participants initiated, against 58% when they followed, and a second study replicated the basic pattern after controlling viewing time. The claim here is not that every pigeon becomes easier to remember because a stranger noticed it. The claim is that attention changes once it becomes shared. This move shows up well beyond humans. Primates can follow where another animal is looking, and dogs confronted with unfamiliar objects may check a human's reaction before moving closer or backing away. Many social animals read another individual's attention or behavior to locate information the world has not explained yet. None of that makes a bus passenger a dog waiting for emotional instructions from the nearest golden retriever. It just means the underlying move is old. When your own situation is unclear, another individual turns into a source of information. Human children pick up a version of the trick early, and during the first year of life, infants often look toward adults when they meet something unfamiliar or ambiguous. Attachment researchers John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth established that infants use their primary caregivers as a secure base from which to interpret the world, and social referencing in the face of the unknown is a direct expression of that same system. Classic visual cliff research by James Chaucer, Robert M.D., Joseph Campos, and Mary Clinert placed infants near an apparent drop while their mothers displayed different emotional expressions, and the results split sharply. Joy or interest on the mother's face sent most infants across, fear or anger kept nearly all of them back, and sadness produced something in between. No probabilities were being calculated in that crib. The baby was not thinking that a maternal facial expression suggested a 37% chance of falling. The baby was checking another mind before deciding how to treat the world. Researchers still argue about what social referencing accomplishes in any given moment. One account has the child gathering information about the uncertain object, while another has the child seeking comfort, closeness, or emotional support. A review by Samantha Ellie and her colleagues argues that both possibilities carry weight because looking at another person can decode the situation and regulate the child at the same time. That distinction reaches adults too. Looking at the stranger after something weird happens, you may be asking what that was, and you may also be asking whether you are allowed to react. Those are two different questions. The world hands you an event, and other people help set its emotional temperature. Christian Muminaller and David Sander tested exactly that with facial expressions and gaze direction. Participants had to recognize an emotion in one face, while a second face nearby showed an emotional reaction and looked either toward the target or away from it, and the target expression itself could stay identical while the surrounding person's emotion and gaze changed how it got recognized. The face beside the event was not decorating the interpretation of it. Paul Ekman's foundational work on the facial action coding system helps explain why those subtle shifts carry so much weight. The face runs through a vocabulary of micro-expressions that your brain reads at speed, whether you are consciously trying to or not. Brian Parkinson, Noreen Fury, and Gary Simons ran another study, this one on adult social referencing during a risk-taking task. 40 pairs of friends watched one another while one person inflated a virtual balloon for potential money, and when the friend was free to show anxiety, that expression shaped how much risk the player took. Suppress the friend's anxiety, and players pushed further and burst more balloons in the gain condition. That was not a study of strangers on public transport, and it does not prove that every glance across a room is a deep evolutionary ritual, but it does show that another person's face can move your behavior before a single word gets spoken. Which brings up the obvious puzzle of why a total stranger works at all. A stranger functions as a low-context witness. Close friends arrive with history attached, and you already know whether they panic easily, laugh at inappropriate moments, or treat every unexplained noise as evidence of government activity. Their reaction still helps, but it comes mixed with everything you know about them. A stranger's face carries less baggage, their reaction stays noisy, and they can still be completely wrong. But it may read more cleanly as a simple response to the thing sitting in front of both of you. If they turn toward the sound, the event probably happened. Confusion on their face suggests you may have misread it. A smile suggests the whole thing is harmless enough to enjoy. A hard stare at the exit counts as a very brief evacuation briefing. None of this makes the stranger reliable. They may have missed the event entirely, they may be distracted, and they may be listening to a podcast about medieval shipbuilding with no idea that a pigeon has boarded public transportation. Your brain does not require accuracy every time, it only requires the cue to pay off often enough to justify the check. That is the reversal at the center of all this. The glance is not evidence that humans are desperate for a random person's approval. The glance happens because a stranger's reaction briefly converts an uncertain event into a shared one. Their face is not a verdict, it is a vote about what kind of reality you are standing in. Brevity is part of the design since looking at a live stranger carries its own social risk. In a 2024 pre-registered study, adults looked less at a stranger who was physically present than at a video of the same stranger, even though EEG measures suggested their attention stayed engaged. The brain was checking the face while working hard not to announce that it was checking the face. That is a strange compromise of public life, where you want information from other people without appearing to study them. The same system now runs in crowds far larger and stranger than the environments that shaped human social attention. Sudden movement in a small group could once mean an animal, an enemy, a falling branch, or someone finding food, and the useful response was quick, which meant locating the stimulus, checking the group, and deciding whether to freeze, move, approach, or ignore it. Evolutionary psychologists call this adaptive vigilance, a threat detection module that paid off so consistently in ancestral environments that it still runs automatically today, even when the threat is a man in a dinosaur suit. These days, the sudden movement is a man losing a fight with a fitted sheet in a department store. The sound is a shopping cart wheel. The danger is a toddler in a dinosaur costume walking with the confidence of a military commander. Your brain still checks the nearest faces. Call that one version of evolutionary mismatch, where a social information system built for immediate group coordination now operates in cities full of strangers. Staged performances, phones, headphones, confusing etiquette, and objects that beep for no clear reason. You can be holding a high-definition camera and still turn to the stranger beside you, because the phone recorded the event without telling you whether you are allowed to laugh. Video gives you evidence, and a face gives you social meaning. That is why the glance so often lands after the event has already been confirmed visually. You are not only checking what happened, you are checking what it means to everyone else. A man slips on a wet floor, and your first look goes to him to see whether he is hurt. Your second look sweeps the room to see whether people are helping or performing careful blindness. Somebody laughs, and the mood shifts. Nobody moves, and you hesitate. One person steps forward, and their action makes it easier for everyone else to act. Psychologists recognize this as related to the bystander effect, the well-documented finding that the more people are present, the less likely any individual is to act, partly because everyone is busy reading everyone else's face for a signal about what to do. Solomon Ashkin conformity research adds another layer. Even when people privately disagree with a group's read of a situation, the pull of social consensus is powerful enough to override their own perception. A glance can organize a group without a meeting, a speech, or one person shouting that citizens should please decide how they feel about the flying sandwich. The stranger can also become a momentary ally. Two people notice the same absurd event, and a tiny connection appears between them, built out of nothing. You do not know each other, you may never meet again, and yet for 2 seconds, you hold a piece of reality that everyone else walked past. That is why the returned glance can feel so satisfying. You look at the stranger, they look back, and both of you know. No names get exchanged and no friendship begins, but the moment has a shape. And what it says is that you saw them see it. The same exchange can misfire badly. If you already live with social anxiety, the clinical experience of treating ordinary social situations as potential threats, the stranger's face stops delivering information and starts delivering evaluation. A neutral expression reads as disapproval, a laugh feels aimed at you, and a person who simply noticed the same event gets converted by your anxious brain into a courtroom audience of one. The amygdala, already primed for threat, flags the ambiguity before the rest of the brain can offer a more charitable interpretation. The system helps, but it was never a careful scientist. It is a fast prediction machine working with incomplete data, and it can mistake silence for rejection, laughter for danger, and someone checking their phone for proof that you are the only person who saw the giant pigeon. Broken is the wrong word for that, since what you are watching is an old tool operating in a crowded, ambiguous place where the signals stay noisy. Checking another person's face is not a failure of independence. Human independence was never built to mean processing every strange event alone, and borrowing information from other minds is part of what lets human groups survive uncertainty. Your reaction is not always a private possession, it gets assembled between people. Next time something bizarre happens and your eyes jump from the object to a stranger, pay attention to what you are actually hunting for. Confirmation that it happened, maybe. Permission to laugh, maybe. Information about whether to move closer, move away, or commit fully to the position that the ceiling has become fascinating. And maybe, for one quiet second, a witness. Back to the pigeon. It walks onto the bus, the doors close, 6 adults look at one another, and nobody speaks because language would make the moment too official. Then the bird turns around and leaves at the next stop, carrying no awareness that it briefly reorganized the emotional state of an entire vehicle. Those strangers will forget each other along with the route, the weather, and the song playing through their headphones. Somewhere in the brain, though, the event stays attached to a face, not because that stranger mattered, but because they were there when reality got weird, and for one moment, the two of you agreed that it had. So when something strange happens, you are either the person who makes eye contact with a stranger or the person who suddenly finds the ceiling to be the most interesting surface in the building. And I would like to know which one you are. If you want to keep understanding why your brain and body do things that make no sense in the modern world, subscribe, because we have a lot more of this coming.